Okay, we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. I appreciate everybody being here so quickly. We were waiting. As you know, yesterday we passed a suspension resolution on the floor of the Senate. We're waiting for the House to get that passed today, and they did pass that this morning with immediate release, which allowed the bill before you to be filed, which is Senate Bill 3231. So I'm gonna call that bill up and explain. Yesterday, Senator Harkins did a quick brief explanation, and you saw through the suspension resolution, kind of the narrative and a lot of the information about the bill. But I'm gonna go through and just give you a little more detail about it. This bill, as you know, issue with PERS has advanced during the session through hard work from both chambers and through various meetings. In particular, Senator Johnson conducted a hearing with the PERS board members and representatives of local government. This taught us a lot about some areas that we needed to try to look at. I learned that the elected members of PERS are doing a good job. They represent the people who elect them to their positions and have a true passion for their job. I was contacted by countless members of PERS asking us to keep the current board members, and I agree with the PERS members that the board members should remain the same. I did have concerns regarding the actuarial advice the board was receiving. In the hearing, the PERS board said that they would welcome additional financial advice. This led to us advancing the bill that you remember from prior. In that bill, we provided a provision that the board seek the advice of two outside actuaries before making any recommendation to change the employer contribution rate. We also suggested changing the policy to allow the PERS board to make recommendations that would then be considered for adoption by the legislature. This particular bill would have frozen the 2% employer contribution rate, and I committed that the legislature would push for a cash infusion into the system. Since the presentation of that bill, which was House Bill 1618, there have been continued discussions between both chambers, and we realized a new bill would be best to accomplish the task of strengthening PERS. As a result, the new bill that is before you has a few changes from what we had before on the floor. This bill still has, first and foremost, the language to ensure that the current promises and commitments to retirees will not be changed. This is in lines 113 through 116 and clearly states that those in the system as members, contributors, or retirees receiving benefits will not be impacted. On lines 90 through 112, the bill includes the same language I discussed a moment ago concerning the need for additional actuarial advice. The board will consult with two outside actuaries before making recommendations, and the legislature will review these recommendations before implementing a change. On lines 84 through 89 of the bill in front of you, the legislature will implement a staggered increase in the employer contribution rate. This stagger will be incremental changes of 0.5% each over 5 years. At the end of 5 years, the net increase to the employer contribution rate will be 2.5%. This stagger will allow participating entities such as cities, counties, schools, and such to better prepare for this change. It will also honor the wishes of the board that a change would be made. Lastly, in lines 109 through 111, it states that the intent of the legislature is to look at a tier for future employees to further strengthen the system. Any look at future tier, again, will not have any impact on current beneficiaries or those who are receiving and participating in the system at this time. I believe this phase-in will bolster the system and make the system stronger and help prepare it for the future. In addition, I believe the legislature will further back the PERS system this year by infusing a cash contribution of significant dollar amounts into the system. I've heard discussions of up to $100 million or more this year. I believe this compromise also will leave PERS stronger and with more sound actuarial advice going forward. And I also want the recipients to know that we are all fighting for them and with them to help strengthen the system. And I apologize for a long explanation, but I yield for any questions. Senator Blunt.
No questions, Steve.
If there are no questions, I recognize Senator Blunt to speak on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to first say that I appreciate your comments and your steadfastness as it relates to the board question. And I appreciate you including the language that nothing in this bill shall be construed to reduce or eliminate any benefits. I'll say, I felt like I never went to law school, but I felt like I just about could have gone this morning when I read a lengthy memo that was provided about 13 years ago by the peer committee on the legal obligation of the state, the contractual obligation of the state to current retirees and to current employees under the California rule. That's an obligation that we have. And I think saying this in the bill helps, so there's no question about that. But this is not what we need to do. This reflects the world that we wished we lived in. The world we live in is that we have a contractual obligation, and this system is going to require money. We have to pay the benefits that have been earned, whether we like it or not, to the people who are retired and the people who are members of the system. For the preceding 8 years, this building has been obsessed with nothing but tax cuts. And we have passed $1 billion in tax cuts, and the House of Representatives proposed an additional $2.5 billion of tax cuts, which did not take effect thanks to leadership in this body. And now we don't want to pay the bills that we owe. We owe this money, and it's going to be difficult. But the sooner we recognize that, the less damage there's going to be. The longer we wait in acknowledging this problem and this debt that is owed by this state, the worse it's going to be. And when I heard that this was being proposed, I don't know that this has been done, but I called PERS. For the last 3 years, I've been one of the 2 senators who have been attending these meetings at the appointment of the lieutenant governor. And so I've been in these meetings. I've heard what's being discussed. And I said, if we do what the board is proposing, what will be the unfunded liability in 2047? If we do what is proposed in this bill, what will be the unfunded liability in 2047? If we do what the board is proposing, the unfunded liability will be 66%. 66% funded. If we do what is proposed in this bill, the system will be funded at 49%. This is cheaper to the taxpayers and the system. And Lord knows we all wish it could be cheaper, but the numbers are the numbers, and we owe this money. And the obsession with tax cuts last year, and now the crying about where in the world are we going to get this money? How in the world are we going to pay for this? Now, we had an opportunity to do what we could help our cities and our counties. There's things in here I support. I support a 5th tier, but you know, the bill is coming due on this. And the longer we wait to acknowledge it, the more it's going to cost. And we have an opportunity to fix it. And this is not, in my opinion, in the best interest long-term for the system. And for that reason, I think we should keep the authority with the board to set the rate. And I believe we should help our local governments, in particular our school districts, with meeting the increased costs that have to be paid. So I'm going to vote no on the bill, but I wanted to share those thoughts with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blunt. And to a couple of points you raised, you know, I know when we met on this in government structure and we had our hearings with the PERS board, one issue that came to light was that the computations and the analysis that was being made regarding the 2% increase suggested by the PERS board was based on the numbers that came out of October and into December. And if you recall from our last discussion on this on the floor, the number in October of last year reflected about $29.5 billion in the system. And we learned in the committee that $850 million a year of kind of extra money goes out in COLA payments in the month of December. And so the system seems to be in the most need of cash at about January. The dollar amount I saw around January was a little over $30 billion, maybe approaching $31 billion. But we learned in the government structure meeting that the account balance per one of the PERS board members was around $33 billion. So to your point, a key part of this bill is actuarial advice and the input from other people to get more information and more analysis. Because if the account has made an extra $2 billion since the start of the year because of market changes, that may have changed, both the decision to institute the 2% change, but also the decision to continually look at changing the ARR of the anticipated rate of return, down from the original 7.75 to the 7.0. I hope with some extra eyes on the system, we'll get more analysis and more numbers that can further help us to make an intelligent and more, not that their analysis is not intelligent, but a more educated assessment of the system, because I think it's the desire of everyone in this room and everyone who participates or knows people within the system to leave it as sound as we can. So I look forward to hearing some of that additional actuarial advice. I believe that might possibly change the numbers you mentioned today, but I'm not sure, but I look forward to their advice. Are there any other questions or statements on the bill? Senator Hobson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In response, I guess, to my good friend and desk mate, Senator Blunt, I don't see anything in this bill that is putting the state in a worse condition. I would say that there's no one at this table that has ever voted for anything that has put PERS in the situation that it's in. The PERS situation that we're in right now, the unfunded liability portion, is largely related to decisions that were made long before any of us got here. And I think everyone would agree with that. The only decisions that have been made since Senator Blunt and I have been here have actually been to increase the employee contribution and to go back to what was originally intended in the retirement system. That's a 30-year retirement. There was not, which were positive moves for the system. So the legislature has actually done positive things to make sure the system was bolstered. And this legislature and those that have been here, that is healthier. Thank you, Senator Brady. It's in a healthier situation than what it is. The concern that a lot of people don't realize that's out there is if we increase the employer contribution to the levels of what was recommended. The initial recommendation that we received from the PERS board was go up 10%. What that effectively does, it forces schools, cities, counties, not to mention state agencies, IHL and community colleges, to actually dip into their funds that they would otherwise use for teachers, for employees, for programs and other things, to a place where they're going to lay off people. And the concern, and I think most people understand this, but a lot of people don't understand that the concern that you have when you have that kind of employer contribution increase, which probably would be the highest in the country. I can't say that with definitiveness, but I can say when I spoke with the director at PERS, to get over 20% on employer contribution with our high employee contribution would be an incredible burden on the system. And the concern is that it would collapse on its own. So I think the proposal, albeit, this is, I don't think anybody's got an exact answer. If we did, I think we'd all be happy to jump on it and pass it. The system has got to be looked at as a whole of government, state government, city government, county government, schools, and all those things, because we can't look at this through the singular lens of what is it that's going to affect the PERS system. I think we have to look at it from an overall standpoint of what's healthy for our state. And I think, while, again, I don't know that there's a perfect solution, but this is certainly giving people a lot more information when you have actuaries that are looking at the right responses, when you have a chance to look at a fifth tier. And what I think we will do this year is to put a significant financial contribution into the PERS system to help bolster it. Maybe not as much as I would like, but it's keeping from the system collapsing on its own. So I don't think this is a bad decision. I don't know that it's perfect. It's my good friend, Senator Blunt, but I think this is a step in the right direction to try to get the system healthier. So I certainly am going to support this, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for bringing it up and really the great discussion that's been had throughout this session on things that can be done to help the PERS system. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And would you, can I recognize you for a motion? A motion entitled sufficient do pass. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That bill will be reported. Please record Senator Branning as not voting. And I would like to go ahead and bring this bill up on the floor. So I believe we adjourn subject to call. And so I'm going to head back up and see if the Lieutenant Governor will do that so we can just move forward on this. Thank you. Motion, rise and report.